Sure.
I'd love to dive right in. So I'd love for you, if you could just introduce yourself, Jake, and I'm going to put you on the spot and say that one of the things we do, our new Commodores here at Commio, see what I did there. We ask them to share one interesting fact about themselves. So I'm going to catch you completely unawares, and after your introduction, if there's something interesting you'd like to share, I'd love to know what that is.
Yeah. So my name is Jake Leonard. I am a system administrator in telephony for Numerica Credit Union. I've been here for about 5 years, coming up on 5 years here in a couple months. Interesting fact about me. Um, I think the one that catches most people off guard is I am severely colorblind.
Oh,
I am red-green colorblind. My wife gives me a hard time about it all the time, asking me if I'm going to go out in public looking like that. So, um,
okay.
and then maybe a little less self-deprecating. I am a first or second born generation Italian, and pretty much 100% Italian on both sides of my family. So very proud of my
Wow.
heritage.
Nice. Good to
Yeah.
hear. Good to hear. Well, we could use more colorblind people on election day, right? As we go into Christmas as well. I don't know. There's a joke in there somewhere. Hey, I tell you what, Jake, I'd love to hear more about when did you first start working in telecom? What got you into that side of things?
Yeah, so it was kind of a very organic. I was actually working more on the help desk capacity for Numerica. I came from a sysadmin role to Numerica because it was a good opportunity. And then COVID started, and
Mm,
historically, Numerica didn't have a telephony guy. They had one guy that kind of dealt with it, but it wasn't his main responsibility. And they were trying to find someone to take that off his plate. So I didn't really have much that was interesting me at the time. So I stepped up to the plate and said, offered my name, like, hey, I'll take it over. Kind of the rest is history. I've gone through a provider porting, so moving from our old carrier to you guys, Commio.
hmm.
I've also gone through a complete PBX redesign. We converted our on-premise phone system to a cloud-based phone system. That's
Nice.
been live for about 2 months now. So it's been a short career in telephony so far, just a couple of years, but it's been fast paced and I've done quite a bit. So
That's great. That's great. Can you clue us in on who's your new back end system?
yeah, we were on Pure Connect before, which is a Genesis product, and we stayed with Genesis and ended up going to Genesis Cloud. It's been a learning curve for sure. There's been some things that we wish it could do that the old system did, but overall, it's a great way for our folks, our employees, to be able to manage their employees and really make the member journey a little bit better for the folks that are calling in.
That's great. Andrew, you said you're on Genesis right now, right?
Yeah, we're on Pure Connect right now,
Okay.
and
Okay.
yeah, we're sort of having that consideration about whether we're going to go to Genesis Cloud or some other vendor. So, Jake, I may want to chat with you additionally after this at some point.
Yeah, for sure. Tim, you can feel free to forward over my contact info. I'd be happy to chat.
Great.
Since we converted from Pure Connect, there's a couple pain points that
Yeah.
our reseller didn't highlight that I would probably highlight to you. But yeah, we can definitely talk about that.
Great. Well, one question right out of the gate, Jake. So when you were making that transition, you decided to come over and allow us to be your bring your own carrier solution. Kind of walk us through sort of that decision making and how easy was it to make that connection happen?
Yeah, so it was kind of it was kind of we had a straw that broke the camel's back with our old carrier. We had, since I took over the phones at the start of COVID, we saw a large increase in traffic to our contact center, and one of the struggles that we were running into is that call volume had just expanded so much that our carrier and the contract that we had couldn't keep up. We were limited to a certain number of sessions that calls could come in, and if you were exceeded that anything past the that limit, would ring busy or cannot be completed as dialed. In the financial space, that's a very worrying thing when you call into your place that your money is held, and it says no one's home essentially. So really that was a big pain point for us, and there wasn't really a way for us to scale that well. The other issue, and not to throw the other carrier under the bus, but we had a month that we had more days with issues than without, and really all I could say to all of our executives is I'm waiting for the carrier to give me something to go off of. And we had I think our worst stretch within that month was 3 days of complete downtime with no updates from our carrier. So
yeah, wow, that's tough.
Yeah, and then the actual decision process, though, the SVP of IT, her name's Casey Murray. She's honestly the best leader I've ever had the pleasure of working with. The reason I say that is that she is very knowledgeable in her field, but she also trusts the topic experts. And even though I was relatively new into telephony, I did my homework with the different carriers, and essentially we had two that we were considering. We were considering Think at the time, Commio, and then Lumen, who used to be CenturyLink, I believe. But really the pitch that I had is that, Commio's going to save us money, help with our redundancy issues, and then we aren't limited for sessions. So we're not going to run into the issue that we've been continuing to hit with the increased traffic with COVID. And at that time, we had no end in sight for, people working from home, our branches not being open or reduced hours or what have you. So those were three really big pieces. And Casey, gave me the grace to do a test run with you guys and get some numbers set up, make sure proof of concept works, and everything is going to be smooth sailing there. Kind of the rest is history from there. It just made sense to go with you guys on a cost basis, a redundancy basis, and just a unique way to solve the problems that we had.
Yeah, we looked at a list of the 46 carriers that are available in our solution a little bit ago, and I'm curious, how many of those do you have turned on in your profile now? And have you had an occasion recently to go in there and turn one off temporarily because you saw an issue? Kind of, what have you seen from the tools side of things?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say we've had to turn anything off recently. Every once in a while, if I have to call into support for an issue that we're seeing, they usually set up a route block for me. So it basically just temporarily blocks that carrier that we have turned on. Usually they do it for a week. And I've actually noticed that they do that even if they can't confirm the issue is on the carrier side, and 99 times out of 100 it ends up being on our side anyway. But that route block was just kind of a precaution. I believe we have, I'd have to double check, but I think it's 32 carriers turned on currently.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the 32 carriers that we turned on the day we spun up our environment with you guys. So I haven't really had to mess with anything, and those route blocks, they remove themselves after the expiration date.
Right.
But even that has been few and far between, and it's just a fantastic way to do things because I have so many levers I can pull if I need to, but I just haven't had to yet.
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask the big question right at the beginning here, and that's that the title of this webinar was how Jake sleeps better at night. So I have to ask, are you sleeping better at night with this solution in place?
Yes, for sure. Less so in the last couple months because of the new phone system, but okay. Yeah, I mean, realistically, the big thing for me was just redundancy, and the question has come up of there's other carrier options out there, and my big thing that I keep hammering home with our executives is like I don't care if it saves us pennies, thousands of dollars, the redundancy that we would lose is just not worth it, because if the goal is for every call to connect the first time, then we need to have a unique solution for that. So
right. All right, Andrew, thanks for tuning in. I see you have to run. Appreciate it. We'll get you guys connected. Thank you.
Right.
Jake.
Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah. Let me ask too. So it's like you mentioned that you were able to, save some money when you came over to us. Can you give us a kind of ballpark that for us? Like how did that sort of pan out for you as you've gone through this process?
Yeah, it's a tough question because things have shifted so much. We went from a a standard contract to where we pay for a certain number of sessions. It doesn't matter how many minutes you use, and shifted into the Commio model, which is you can have as many sessions as you want. And you're paying based on usage, and then couple that with the crazy increase that we've seen in call volume. Our contact center has grown, I want to say 30 or 40% since the start of COVID. So we're really bulking up our workforce there. But I always struggle with contracts when it's on a company level because I'm relatively new to this, but I know that it was a significant percentage. I want to say our initial quote was about 40 to 50% cost savings.
Great.
I'm not sure if that's where it stayed with all of the growth. I'm not sure if we could even calculate that, but
right.
The good news is that when budget season comes around, that line item is never questioned because they're like, oh yeah, that's way less than what we used to pay, even if it is, getting closer because of that growth that we've had. But growth is good.
Best answer I've heard. That's great. As somebody who's going through budgeting right now for next year, not everything's going to stay, and the things that I get to do. But I'd love to hear that. Lawrence, I wanted to put it out here too. Like before I get into some of my other questions, do you have any questions you wanted to ask Jake directly?
I don't know if Jake uses any of the text message capabilities or if it's purely telephony. Otherwise, I think I don't want to waste his time.
Sure.
We haven't explored too much with the SMS portion. The issue that we saw with our previous PBX with Pure Connect was that we needed a custom XML document to allow a different carrier than what Genesis allowed. That being said, it is something that's kind of on my radar, but I have not dove into that as of yet, unfortunately.
Let's see. Jake, and thanks for that question, Lawrence. I would say something for both you guys to keep in mind too is we just launched hosted SMS. So it used to be the case where you'd have to, port your numbers over to us to allow us to enable text messaging. And now you don't have to. So we have a way to, even if you don't, sign an LOA and do that porting, we can still deliver text messages to your existing phone numbers. So just something to think about. I think that was one of the last pieces of the puzzle that we didn't support. And now that's been live for a little while now. So anyway, Lawrence, like I said, we'd love to talk to you more about your text messaging needs. And we could definitely get into that. But Jacob, we go back over. So you mentioned not only did you transition the phone system, but you also obviously transition your carrier layer. I'm curious, as all this was coming together, did anything happen that kind of like surprised you or like stood out during the process that you didn't expect, or maybe good or bad, I guess?
Right. So the porting process is near and dear to my heart because there was a lot of pain points there. Never on the fault of Commio. It was always on the fault of the losing carrier because that's always a fun conversation to have. But essentially, the biggest issue that I ran into was our old carrier couldn't even tell us what numbers we owned. We could go into their portal and export all of the numbers that we have. We have roughly 1,300 numbers, I believe. The export gave me, I believe it was 36,000 lines of these are the numbers that you own. So the data was duplicated. The data wasn't accurate, come to find out. So it was just a big pain point there. But once we got the losing carrier out of the way, the whole process was, there was multiple moments of laughing to myself of like, is it really this easy? Like, am we just doing this? Okay, great. And that's kind of stayed true with everything that we've had to do since moving to you guys. Even when we moved over from our old phone system to our new phone system, it was literally 5 seconds. I selected all of our numbers, changed where it was pointing to. I'd already tested it and all of that, and it was live. It was a big wow moment for the person that was helping me during the conversion of, yep, we're live. 3 seconds later, there was no worry, there was no issues. But realistically, it's just been everything that I've had to do with Commio has been very, very easy, and it seems like all of the other carriers that I've dealt with are doing things backwards.
Well, it's good to hear, Jake. I will tell you that We actually hired a whole dedicated porting and provisioning team. So we have, I think it's either 6 or 7 literal full-time employees that deal with sourcing phone numbers. We get requests all the time. I think we have many millions of numbers that are under our control now, which wasn't the case even a year ago. So we're building our number library. We're really building out our inbound redundancy, which you'll be hearing more about coming into 2023. But we did take care, and it was fun to be part of the process with that team for making sure that, I'm sure you saw those emails with, step 1, step 2, step 3, where is your port in process? And I don't know, between you and me, it feels a little bit like sometimes the carriers use that whole process as a way to try to get you to stay. They're just like, oh, this is going to be rough. Do you really want to go? And it's like, everybody knows that's been in the business long enough. This is just part of the process. Phone numbers are going to come, they're going to go. And if you stand in the way, you're not really doing yourself any favors. It should be super fluid, and there's no reason that it's should be difficult.
Oh yeah, and the porting team, when I worked with them, they were fantastic. There was an issue that our old carrier was requiring all of our numbers and the service location that they're assigned to, that we needed to put every single port per service location. We couldn't do like one mass port of all 1,300 numbers. And of course, it took back and forth with our carrier, like 15 times to figure out that's what they were wanting. But the porting team was super patient, super helpful. They helped reach out to see if there was any strings that they could pull, anything else that they could find out. So, I mean, without them, I probably would have thrown my hands up in the air and said, all right, I guess we're just staying. This is ridiculous. Because, once a business owns a phone number, especially a main number that's on your website, you can't afford to lose that number. That has to stay with you. Because once someone saves it in their phone, they're never going to delete that or update that. That's always the number that they're going to call.
Sure.
So the porting team was fantastic, to say the least.
Well, great. I'm really glad to hear that. So porting's good. Buying, provisioning new phone numbers are good. I think you mentioned that you had to add at least 1 or 2 more, or maybe more, new toll-free numbers too, right? And that process was just as easy.
It is. The reason I'm laughing is that before it took multiple weeks to add toll-free numbers. I never had to do that process, but the guy I took the phones over from, his name's Pat. Pat needed a new toll-free we were doing a conversion for our online banking, so our website and our mobile app. So we needed a new toll-free that we could utilize. And I ordered a toll-free in 2 clicks, I believe it is. And it was live and ready to go and routing properly. And my coworker, Pat, he was almost in tears. I'm not kidding or exaggerating, because he was so happy at how easy that was. We get excited about nerdy things here, but it's anytime I need a number, whether that's for testing or for production, it's the least of my worries, because it's 2 clicks and it's cheap, and it's just there and works and right after you do it. So,
well, that's great. I was going to say, what was I going to say about that? I mean, obviously Commio / Think originally, we're a REST-borg, so we can source new toll-free just with the best of them. So we're in the same league as the other folks. Some of you that are watching probably are familiar with CLEC. So really, Commio was the first VLEC, right? So we're a virtual local exchange carrier. But we can do everything that all the big names you've heard of can do and more, thanks to the cloud and the systems that we've set up. So I'm glad to hear it's all working for you, and not only saving you money, but you've got that redundancy and the routing control, and our support team is always here to help. So Jake, I'm glad to hear, and you're kind of sleeping better at night, so that's good. Hopefully we'll get the rest.
Definitely am. I don't have to worry about the carrier side of things. I will say the other piece about that toll free and ordering numbers in general, and just the whole Commio portal. No offense to anyone on this call, but you don't have to talk to a person to do anything, which is fantastic. I mean, I can contact support at Commio if I need something, but the fact that I can go in, order a number, order 10 numbers, 100 numbers, whatever. And then they're just working. I didn't have to wait for someone to check their email or check a ticketing system. It's there and ready to go. And I don't have to wait around for, someone else to get to it. I can just be self-sufficient. And with how fast everything moves in the financial space and in the information technology space, waiting is not great at times. So it is a fantastic feature that I think should be emphasized, that you can be self-sufficient with a lot of different levers that you can pull.
That's great. That's the goal. And Jake, you also mentioned that I think previously you had some issues with E911, and we know that's super important with credit unions and financial systems. So can you kind of walk us through sort of the before and after?
Yeah, so before we had your traditional POTS lines in the branches, those are physical lines that go to phones that are there, and you only have certain phones that can dial out using those. The issue that we were running into is that those lines can go down at any given time, and there's no way to alert that line isn't working. We actually had a squirrel that chewed through one of them at one of our branches. We didn't, and since they aren't utilized on a daily basis, they only would find out when there's an emergency and they need to call. So obviously something had to change there. With our old carrier E911, they actually passed that off to a different service. So we had to log into a different portal and update everything there. And the communication between the two just wasn't really great. Flip side, Commio, again, the portal, I don't have to wait for a human. I can update the address for all of the numbers. We actually just utilize one number per location. So anytime someone calls 911, it utilizes the number that we set for that. If they make normal calls, it uses their phone number. That way we can provide that location information to law enforcement, which is super crucial in the space that we're in, because thankfully it hasn't happened, at least in my memory of working here, to where there's a robbery or anything like that. But that's not the only reason that you would call 911. It could be a medical emergency, and that call needs to work the first time every time. We can't have POTS lines going down like, oh darn, okay, we'll get that fixed, sorry about that. It needs to work every time.
Gotcha. And Jake, I know there's some people watching that are thinking about making a change to their voice stack, and maybe even considering Commio. But I'd love for you to, if you could just sort of, if you could say one thing to those folks, why would you say they should consider talking with Commio and seeing if we can be a good fit?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to give one, but so I will give a couple. I know I'm breaking the rules there. The easy sell point for higher ups and companies is cost. It's just cheaper. I don't have to know what your quote is from other carriers that you have. What you're currently paying, you're going to pay less with Commio. That's the easy sell. The other easy sell for higher ups and for your IT department is less downtime, since there's that redundancy built in with a bunch of different carriers. To choose your own adventure, you can, if you have a grudge against your old carrier, you can turn off, CenturyLink or whatever. But if one carrier goes down, you can turn off that carrier, or it routes around it. So you're not going to have to deal with the carrier side of things. You can focus on just what matters to your company. And then the final piece, and selfishly my favorite part, is what I've been alluding to and calling out, is that the portal just makes the carrier side of things so easy. It's such a great service for IT professionals to be able to go in and look at diagnostics of what a call did and why it failed, to look at all of your failed calls to a certain number, or your entire environment. And then the support side of things, if you do need to reach out to someone, the support team's fantastic. Every time I've dealt with them, they've been great. We're a West Coast based company. Commio is obviously East Coast, and I've never had an issue of calling in and not being able to talk to someone. So fantastic service there. And then on top of that, they even answer my crazy off the wall questions. If I'm not really understanding something right, or I have a problem on my end, I'll ask kind of an open-ended question to them, and they always have an answer for me. Or if they need to get a ticket open, I usually have an answer within an hour or two from someone on their team. But it's just been an overwhelmingly positive experience. I mentioned to Tim and Sherry when I first talked to them, they asked me, how do I feel about Commio, or like, what are my thoughts about them? But the highest compliment I can give to a vendor is that I don't have to think about you guys, which is fantastic. If you guys are doing what we signed a contract for and exceeding those expectations, like, that's money to me. Like, I don't have to think about you guys because everything's working. It's nothing against you. You guys are great, but the other things are going on. There's other vendors that I have to kind of wrangle in a little bit. So
yeah, well, that's a secret on our part too, Jake. We love you guys too, but we'd also much rather, we got lots of other fish to fry too. So if we're both doing what we need to do, that's a win-win in our book.
Exactly.
So that's great. Well, Jake, hey, I appreciate it. Sorry for the little snafu there at the beginning. I'm glad we got you in here, and appreciate your time and your input. And like I mentioned, we did record the session, so we'll be sending that out pretty soon. And Jake, with your permission, we'll make sure to give out your contact info to the attendees in case they have any questions for you.
For sure.
But
I do want to add one more thing that I forgot to bring up, and it's around E911. And this is so crucial because I found it by accident looking through your guys' knowledge base, but it's the 711 for E911.
Yes.
So Commio actually has a service with E911 to where you can test that the number's presenting itself properly, and then what the address is of that number. And it's by dialing 711. There's specific routing that has to go into it as well, but something that you can set up. And it's been amazing for us because part of the issue that we had with the POTS lines going down is that there was no real way to test that. So we actually have a number that our branches can call that dials out, says, here's your address, here's the number, everything's working, and then hangs up. So you don't have to bug your local law enforcement with those test calls, because we wanted to do them every month. And that's a lot of resources that we would be taking away from our local law enforcement, because you can't call the non-emergency line. You have to call the 911 line for everything to come over properly. So the 711 was a fantastic service for us to solve a problem that we had, and it has given us so much peace of mind, because even though everything is now SIP instead of physical lines, it still is something that we can test and make sure everything's good. And we haven't had any issues since converting to E911 on Commio, so I'm very thankful for that.
Glad to hear that. Yeah, you're not the first person to say that. I'm glad to hear that you're taking advantage. I will say this, Jake, is there anything that you'd love for us to be able to do for you on the telephony side that we're not doing for you today? Got you covered.
Yeah, I don't really have any big asks. I haven't dove into your guys' API much. I've started to kind of work with that a little bit. You did mention the text messaging piece earlier today that I actually didn't know existed. So after this, I'm going to be looking into that. Sure. Other than that, I mean, you guys are expanding your number base. I think the biggest, I can't even say complaint, the biggest thing I've noticed is when I order a number, the numbers that I can order are usually from different areas within Washington. It's tough because our area code is 509, which covers like a 400-mile radius within Washington. So it's a very large area code. So numbers become less plentiful as time goes on. But the good news is I've never had no numbers that I can order. I can always order numbers and pick from the ones that I need. So,
well, that's a great request, Jake. Actually, we Sam Schiffman, who came over to us when we acquired the company Commio, and then we decided to change our whole company name to Commio. Sam can source phone numbers very readily. So if you have specific needs and specific area codes, just let us know, and we're buying blocks of numbers, and we can definitely take care of that if you have any issue not finding what you really want.
Cool. The good news is we haven't had to expand much as far as like big blocks of numbers. It's always been for like, special one-off use cases that we want a new phone number. So it hasn't really been a deal, but that is great that you guys have an option if we do need to buy a big block.
Yeah, well, even if you just need one or two, I mean, like I said, he's buying blocks all over the U.S. and expanding our footprint. So if you're like, you know what, I really wish I had X, Y, and Z in these areas, he'll absolutely, get those for you because we'll use them for other customers as well. But
for sure,
awesome.
For sure.
All right, Jake. Well, hey, like I said, appreciate your time again, and we'll we'll definitely keep in touch. And so happy to have you on board, and glad you're happy and. Lot of big things, just we're not going to reveal too much on this call, but we just got through our 2023 planning and we've got a number of really interesting new products we're hoping to bring to market next year. I've got a nice list of about 9 things that we've been asking for quite a while. So we'd love to add on to, our existing, voice as well as messaging services with some other unique things. Nice. Something that is not even available in the industry today that could be really interesting that I really can't talk about, but it's pretty exciting as somebody who I didn't come from the telecom world. I'm more of a marketing internet startup guy, but it's just been interesting to watch how this industry has changed. I'm coming up on my 4th anniversary with Commio, and some things are getting tougher, some things are getting easier, but there's more flexibility to be had now that we're using the internet for all these interesting services in this way. And we're really diving in deep on some things that can really help us stand out. So I'm excited to be part of spreading the word about those. So more to come. And by the way, I don't know if you guys saw, I sent out an email. I think everybody on this call got a copy of it. But we're also looking for your input, even you, Jake. Are there any trade shows that you like to attend that you're looking at next year, that are in this space that either you're planning to attend or you'd like to attend? We're trying to find places as the marketing guy. I'm trying to find places for us to show up to talk to other people just like you guys. So I'm just curious if any shows come to mind.
Not offhand for me. That being said, I since I'm relatively new to this, I haven't really gone to a whole lot. It's been kind of focused on getting us to a stable spot. And
sure.
That being said, I can ping a couple people that are a little more privy to that and get back to you guys. But I know that we have a couple big tech conferences, at least in Washington for sure. But there's some decent ones within Spokane. So.
Yeah, honestly, Jake, I'd love to learn more about those. Like we'd love to be able to go to places where there isn't 17 other, vendors that look like us. We'd like to be one of the only ones there, talking with people like you. So I'd love to learn more on the West Coast. I know we've got IT Expo on the list. That one, by the way, is coming up number 1. That's in Fort Lauderdale coming up in Q1. So, a sunny destination. We've also done Enterprise Connect, but that one seems to be going a little bit down. Anyway, I won't waste your guys' time going through the list, but we don't go to a lot of shows on purpose, but I think next year we're going to try to step that up a little bit and start spreading the word. So,
you guys did meet our support vendor at I'm not sure what show, and this was years ago, but that's how we heard about you. So,
okay,
word of mouth did travel through that channel. So, I can ping them too and see. But they're a company named Mnet.
Mnet, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'd love to hear from them. All right, Jake, and thanks everybody on the line. And like I said, we'll be sending out the recording, and feel free to ping back. It'll come from me directly, so feel free to ping back any questions or thoughts you might have. And we'd love to have a conversation with anybody who's looking to add voice or text messaging to their stack, and see if Commio's a fit. A lot of times we are, sometimes we're not, but we're not pushing people into anything. But I think we've got some interesting solutions that could be valuable to you and your organization. So, Jake, thanks again for your time.
Yeah, thanks everyone for having me. Yep.
All right. We'll talk soon.
Have a great day.
Thanks, guys.